streaming. So it is working. So we will have both the Canvas recording, just like usual, and the YouTube recording as a backup. And once it's available, I will send you the link, just like what I did after the class completed. And so you can review this lecture anytime you want it. Okay, just like usual. Of course, except this is not the normal hour, so Shane will not be joining, or no one will be joining this section other than myself. So far the camera and then the speakers are working. So let's go ahead and start it. Before we do, I have to forget to load up the document that we will be using today. So let's load it up onto the screen for the slides that we're going to talk about. Today's topic is on objects and styles. This is part of the section 3 of the module. After loaded, I will look at the modules together and the expectation on this particular section. There are only 16 slides to be used today, so it's not long. We'll talk a little bit more about the slides, some of the subjects, and most of you may already have experience on objects and styles, but we'll spend some time to explain it. Make sure everybody are on the same page. Okay, let's go to the full screen mode so we can start talk about our schedule and the materials that we are going to cover today and the next few weeks also. Give me 1 second when the full screen is starting. I think full screen mode has started. Seems to be working. Let's look at the conference is in session and it is recording. Both the camera and the speaker seems to be working. So we are all good to go. First, look at our calendar. You folks have completed 2.1 assignment. If you have not done it, please go ahead and submit it as soon as possible. And also, make sure you join the discussion session on sorting. And there will be another one on website and also an assignment 2.2 that we have talked about last time. I did a show and tell last lecture on Tuesday on this 2.2. Some of it at least. Today, I will spend some time to talk about another assignment for next week, which is the temperature conversion program for next week. Okay, just to make sure you know what the expectation is, and also give you a kickstart, a head start on how to write this particular program. Okay, just like usual. So the first half we'll go over the slides on objects and styles. And then second part we will look at the program temperature conversion, which make use of the last assignment 2.2 that we talked about last lecture. Use most of the feature and change it to do temperature conversion. Okay, so that's what we're going to do today. Class module, we are completing this particular section on conditions, styles, and DOM, document object model. That's what we're going to cover today. The two assignments for that, one is the temperature conversion that we will cover today, and another one is day and time website. Please take a look, which is due in more than a week. So you should have enough time to take a look on that. I believe that one is using the date mode, the date objects that we covered a couple lectures ago. Okay. With that said, I think we're all set to start our presentation. Camera and speaker are still working. Let's close down the full screen mode. Then we go to the slides presentation first. Okay, now we're back. We will verify, make sure the YouTube recording is working. Looks like it is. And let's close it down. And then we will start this lecture first. Objects and styles. So we have talked about JavaScript is a object-based programming language. So objects is important. And we treat the whole HTML page as an object, as a document object. Within that document objects, there are many other elements that we can address to or identify from JavaScript, so that we can dynamically modify the information. So that's why we use JavaScript, to make it more dynamic. And we will learn how to talk about DOM, and then we will talk about how to reference the DOM objects and some of the properties and the styles involved in those objects and how to address them. Okay. So, pull down menu. Pull down menu means something that is not visible to the user until they pull down that data from the heading. So they click on the menu title or move the mouse over, and then there will be a drop down for the user to choose to view. So that's drop down menu. Okay. Pull down menu, I'm sorry. There were some set up for that purpose, but however we don't have it. So, but if you want to know more about pull down, please try to experiment it. That is more on HTML side, not really JavaScript. First of all, you have to know how to do that in HTML. Okay. So you should be able to do an exercise yourself using HTML and CSS file to do the pull down. Okay. If it's not, go to the W3C school and search for pull down menu. You should be able to find something related and go over those. Now, let's talk about objects, properties, methods, and events. You already know what objects are. The whole document is an object, a big one. Then individual one will have their properties, and also we have methods to manipulate the objects, each of the elements. And we will talk a little bit about something new, events. Things happen during that session, those are events. And web-based design are all event-driven, mostly. So we are waiting for the user to do something. Then when the event happens, like clicking the mouse, moving the mouse over, when the event happens, then we will handle the event accordingly. And using JavaScript to handle the event is the common way of doing dynamic HTML setup. So basically, we will have the properties, the methods, and the events for the objects. We know how to manipulate them. And JavaScript supports 3 types of objects. The built-in objects, we have learned a little bit about it. Remember the math object, the date, objects. Those are built in API, coming with the language. By default, we just use it. We don't have to redefine them. So it's handy, like the date object. The other objects, okay, defined by your document object, the window, some of the basic elements, and they're also customized objects created by you as a programmer. So basically 3 types: the built-in, the document objects, that the DOM, and also customized objects that you define, and we can do. For all objects, they have properties. Properties are the attributes, the data, basically the data set, the variables defined for that particular object. And depends what they are for. Some of them are just for data purpose, some of them can be for appearance purpose. So it depends how you define it, how you design it, or how it was defined by the system. Okay. Methods are functions that will implement the behavior of the object or to manipulate the object properties. So they are methods, they are functions. Okay. So they are procedures that you can implement the behavior or modify the behavior of the object. Event is different. Okay, it does impact the object because whatever happened, you can change and manipulate the object accordingly. Sometimes it associates with different attributes of the object and behave differently and carry out different purpose for the event happen, then you manipulate the objects differently. So we'll look at some of those events. Okay. So the example of web page objects, just like we know, is the window, right? You pop up a window to show your HTML, and that's your base object. Then from that, you display your document, the HTML document, which is the DOM, document object model. And of course, have many properties in there, whatever you define for that HTML. And you have form objects, different forms on the page, and which include names, IDs, actions, different methods to manipulate the form information. That's normal DOM. You could also have control objects to determine the styles, the type, the value, or disable certain things on that particular object, like for display. So those are called control objects, to control the behavior of certain thing. For the paragraph object itself from the HTML, the information on the page, of course there are many different properties and different ways to manipulate them, changing the color, changing the style, the font set, things like that. Then events. Okay. So of course document will have methods to manipulate it, and there will be events that will occur that we have to handle. So from the document, we can do things like document.write, we have learned before, or you do onload or on unload. So when things happen, loading or unloading, you can then call a different function within your JavaScript to manipulate the document accordingly. So that's events handling. And of course, there are forms elements that you can click on or double click, or when the mouse move over, that kind of events have occurred, then you will have an event handler to execute commands accordingly. DOM. DOM is what we use to organize and look at how the HTML file and elements are organized. It's a structure, it's a data structure for the browser, for us to manipulate the data, the document. Okay. And of course we could use scripting language, that's what we're going to use, to access to individual elements within the DOM. Okay. However, there is a problem. I think last time when I did the exercise, even at home, I do see some differences between IE, Firefox, and Chrome on how it accepts input from the text field. Okay, so that's why you have to test your programs, at least from the most popular browsers, to make sure they still work. Even though they may behave slightly different, you just have to make sure they still can function based on what the user needs. That's most important. They could behave slightly differently, but as long as they work and you provide instruction so the user know how to make use of it, that's enough. But they could look slightly different or behave slightly different. So watch out for that. And because of that, the W3C want to standardize on things and make it common for all platforms. But as we said, there are still differences and really depends on the browser developer. However, I would say they are getting better and better, and with the HTML5, CSS3 being widely used, things become more consistent across different platforms, different browsers. The newer browser works better, particularly on HTML5. And because some of the older versions just do not support some of the new standards. So just watch out for that. So newer version does work better for the newer version of HTML and CSS. Okay. So sometimes because of that differences, you do have to have different approach to do that. In the book, we didn't specifically talk much about it, but in the book they did mention few techniques people will use, like making sure it supports JavaScript before you do too much. If it doesn't, you have to at least warn the user that their browser do not support JavaScript, so that you can, or they can, change different browser. Sometimes you could make your program work both ways, but sometimes you are limited because if it doesn't support JavaScript, a lot of dynamic feature just cannot be done. So at least the user know they will lose that kind of features because the browser do not support the newer version or JavaScript. Okay. Here is a tree structure of the DOM. So objects are organized into a hierarchy called document tree. It's like a tree. Each branch contains, of course, different objects and their child, siblings. Okay. So in this case, we have the highest one is, of course, the window. The window contains, of course, your document and some events, the frame, the location history. Some of them we don't use. Some of them are used by the system, but this is part of the document tree. And mostly we focus on the document and manipulate the document elements, like the anchors, the links, the images, the scripts, the forms. Of course, the forms have elements. So all these things we will use JavaScript to manipulate at the front end. Okay, that's how we do dynamic website. Okay. And to reference to the DOM objects, we have to identify them by using the dot notation, like any OOP, the dot notation. From the high up, the window. But sometimes we don't even mention window because by default your program runs within a window. So really everything starts with document. Window is by default. So you don't have to even mention it. You can omit it to make it easier and make the name shorter. So you start with document, is whatever web document, HTML basically, display on that window. And then from that on you use dot body, indicating the body within that particular document. And also keyword events and other also can be used to address to or to identify the particular object element within the DOM. As we said, our focus really is on the document itself, the HTML document. That's the most important part, what we are doing in this class and for the front end dynamic web page development. So from the document, you can see all the anchors, applets, forms, everything, links, and the frame. Okay. If you do that, it will address to all of them, all the anchors, all the applets within that document. Okay. And they're organized in arrays form. We'll look at it. Okay. And of course, when it's array, you can do array length. And then you know how many elements or how many anchors are in that particular HTML. Okay. And then you can use loops. Remember, we said arrays and loops go hand in hand. So you can use loops, any loops, to access to the objects, the list of objects in sequence. Okay. So here, some references. So you have like the document and the image, the first image. Address to that images, the first one start with 0. Things index always start with 0, right? We talked about that before. So you can identify that particular image using the index subscript. Or you can identify that particular image by using a identifier, an ID. Okay, you can use either way and they will find that particular image. It is called logo image. Or of course we can do document get elements by ID, which we use a lot the last few exercises. You create an ID for each of the element, a particular ID, then you can do get element by ID. Then this whole thing will get you that particular element object within the document. Then you can look at the value, look at the inner HTML, and look at other stuff also for that particular object, identified by ID. You can also use the tag name, but you can use a wildcard asterisk. If you do that, that means all tags involved, all tag involved. Okay. Or you can use get element by name. If you name individual element, then you can use get element by name, just like get element by ID. But more commonly used is by the ID. It's easy to identify. We said more than just the object, we can also access to the properties and then the styles. For objects, property is easy. You do object.property and then you can change it if you needed to. So first you have to identify it by using the dot notation. From that you can modify by putting an expression or value to change it. Like this case, for example, you want to make a modification of the image. You have an image tag with the ID logo image, and you have the source as the logo JPG. You can identify that particular image from the list of images on the document, which is an array, by using its identification name, logo image. And then look at the source, and you could change it to anything you want, or just get it out and save it. This one is duplicated because it's already defined, and you also redefine it, put the same thing on it. But you could dynamically change that image source to logo 1 or my logo. So after it was originally loaded with logo.jpg, you can dynamically change that using a JavaScript function. Say when you click a button, you can dynamically change the image to a different source. Okay, that make it dynamic. Play with it. Okay. In addition, you can also address to the CSS style attributes and change them. So the way to do the same, go from the object and the style and the attributes. In this case, like a color change, and you can change whatever color to something different, red, for example. Okay, so pretty handy to use DOM to identify individual elements within your HTML, and use JavaScript dynamically changing the objects, appearance, attributes, behavior of that particular element. Next. But it does have some problem to combine those two, because HTML, CSS syntax sometimes are conflicting with JavaScript programming standard. Like this case, a minus sign. In CSS or inside HTML, you do background dash color. Okay, background hyphen color. But for this, in JavaScript, it will look at it as two variables and minus, so become background minus color. Look at it as a subtraction because of the hyphen is same as a minus sign, so it's treated like an operation. So inside JavaScript, if you type background minus color, it will think you are doing a subtraction of two variables. Okay, so that's why we have to change the convention when we have situation like that to solve the problem, to be compatible between CSS, HTML, and JavaScript on some situation like that. Okay, some of the convention here is to use camel case replacing multiple words, because there's more common practice and best practice is to use camel case for variable definition within JavaScript. So we could do that to change multiple words using camel case. Like this case, we don't like JavaScript doesn't like minus sign, so we change background color to be background capital C color. Ignore the hyphen and use camel case, and in maximum length to follow our camel case standard, in HTML you can use maximum length, but on JavaScript we use max capital L length. Okay, by following the standard, then now we can make HTML, CSS, and JavaScript compatible on some of the naming convention. That is important, because if you don't change it, you put that into your JavaScript, and of course sometimes, as we said before, JavaScript is not a very strict type programming language. It will ignore those, and then you find out the background color is not changed at all, because you think you are doing it will create a variable called background and another variable called color and try to subtract them. Of course you don't get anything out of it, which is undefined, but then you find out you just ignore that, and then you expect to change the background color to yellow, and it is not going to happen because it doesn't do that. It do a subtraction instead. So it is important we follow that standard, not to mistype those names within JavaScript. Otherwise, things is not going to happen like the way you want it. That's important. So remember that. Minus sign and camel case need to be converted in order to be compatible in the JavaScript world. Okay, that's the problem sometimes. It takes some practice and knowledge in order to change that and making sure they're compatible. But as time goes, once you're using those multiple times, then you will get used to them. But it is important that you follow that convention. Otherwise, you will not get the result that you expected, because they are going to be interpreted differently in JavaScript. Okay. Next. So attributes. Okay. So some of them, just like we said before, example, like the maximum length. Inside your HTML, you have this tag for input text field with the identifier and the maximum length. In your JavaScript, you can identify that particular field using its name, ID, and then address to that particular attribute, but you have to use max capital L length to change that. Okay, and you can also do similar things on the style. You can do get element by ID and getting to the style and the value within that style. Now, to do that, the style is color : red. But in the JavaScript world, we have to do style.color, which is the value of what is set to. So we set it to red. So the syntax conversion will be slightly different, because we will try to make these two compatible, because JavaScript do not manipulate the this syntax which CSS use the way we do in JavaScript, so we have to do it this way. So there is a transition in order to make it work. Background color, we have talked about that. Okay, so to address to the background color, same thing, we have to change to camel case because of the minus sign we don't like, and also it doesn't interpret red in JavaScript, so we have to change it to this format in order to address to the color and set it to something you want dynamically. Okay, I think you must have tried that too. Some of you, I think, have already did it in the previous assignment on the chess chessboard, changing the background color. Okay. Let me see. Oh, that's the last slide we have on objects and how it address to elements in the DOM, how we address to the elements in the DOM, and how to manipulate some of the attributes and properties and some of the CSS style information, and how to make it compatible between CSS, HTML, and JavaScript due to the differences in some of the syntax. So those are important because, as I said before, you have to start doing the separation and create HTML, CSS, and JavaScript for different purposes. Do not mix them into a single file. Separate the data, the style, and then the dynamic capability in JavaScript. Okay, to do that, that means you have to make sure they are compatible when you address one element from the other. Okay, if that's that, now this is not detail. There are a lot to cover. How to look at some of the objects, how to manipulate the objects. Okay, there are many elements, different types and attributes within HTML that you know. So play with some of those. We cannot really do exercise on each of them. You will be using some of those, particularly when you are doing bigger projects. Now the assignment we have so far do not require you to do specific things. So there are different ways to do it, and I always choose the easier way to do it. At least I will show you the simplified way to do it. And some of you are very capable on JavaScript and all these elements, so you will do a little bit more complicated way. But I tend to show you the simplified way, the minimum, I would say the minimum to do it. And it's up to you to experiment other methods and other elements using JavaScript to manipulate them, which is important for learning purpose. If you don't do that, you will not learn enough. So you have to experience those. Okay? So by yourself. This is a class that we do not cover a lot inside the class, but there are a lot you could do outside. So we only cover that material, that's particular subject, but there's so many things could be done on that particular subject. So please try to go over some of the tutorials from external sites, since we don't have one for this class. Go over those, go to those sites, a couple sites that we have introduced you to, and type in search the subject that we have talked about, and play with some of the tutorials and learn more in-depth knowledge of those particular subjects. That's how you learn. Okay, we can only teach that much or show you that much within the class. So it's up to you to play with that and to try them out, even on different attributes, not just the one that we show you. Okay, that's for the lecture today, which is quite short. Okay, which is okay. So we will stop the lecture here, and let's make sure everything still works. Camera, everything seems to be working, and let's make sure the YouTube recording is, yes, I'm moving, everything seems to be working, so we are good. I'm not going to rest too long since nobody is here anyway. I'm going to rest for like a minute or two at the most, and I'll continue on this recording with the exercise we're going to do on the next assignment, which is due next week. Okay, so let me have a minute to rest my voice before we continue. Thank you. Okay, I'm back. Okay, the camera and the speaker seems to be blinking and working still, and the YouTube recording seems to be active and live. That's good. Let's continue. Okay, now I'm going to go to full screen mode. We'll take a look on the assignment for next week, and then we'll have a discussion on that. Sometimes I just want to use the assignment first of all to help you out a little bit if you're not familiar with some of the material, to help you to start, and also use that as a vehicle to explain some of the things that we have learned during the presentation. So we'll do that. Okay. First thing is go to full screen mode again, so we can start looking at the program. Okay, give me 1 minute to run the full screen mode. Okay, seems full screen mode is running. The speaker and the speaker is not blinking for some reason. Let me see. Usually it blinks when I stop talking, but maybe the air conditioning turned on to get some background noise. But seems okay. And we know we have a YouTube recording, so I think we should be fine. Okay, so let's continue, since I cannot just stop it. Now it's blinking again, so it seems to be working. I think it's just the air conditioning noise right above me making the sound, running sound, that causing the speaker to be not blinking. But seems the full screen mode is working, so let's take a look on the calendar. As I said, we have done a demo of the last assignment, which is on the movie titles entering from one text area and display on a second one. We have done that demonstration this Tuesday. The next assignment, which is due next week, asking you to do similar things using the same technique you have used in the previous assignment, 2.2, but instead of movie title, we are asking you to accept a temperature value. For example, 32 degree, enter, and then you will convert them and return the Celsius and Kelvin conversion value when they click a button called convert. So you only need 3 text fields. Unlike last time, we have one text field to enter, another text area to display the list. This time you only need 3 text fields, 1 for the Fahrenheit for input, and 2 for the output Celsius and Kelvin. So you accept a value in Fahrenheit, you convert into Celsius or Kelvin. To do the conversion, they gave you a simple program that you could use to convert to Celsius. You get the string. Okay. You can use, it's not a number. Make sure it's not, is it a number? Okay. If it is a number, if it's not a number, you alert them, you pop up alert. If it is a number, then you go ahead and convert. You pass float from the input string, you convert it into a float value, and use that to calculate, using a formula to calculate the Celsius. Okay, and then you round it off, round off the Celsius, and get the value and display it. So it give you that particular one. Of course, you need another one, a function to Kelvin. Okay, and you have to find out the formula to convert from Fahrenheit to Kelvin. Just go to internet and do a type in Fahrenheit to Kelvin, and you will find a formula similar to that, and just write your own to replace this and get a second function that will work. Okay, so basically it's not difficult. All you have to do is set up the handling, how to click the button to trigger your function, then you are all done. Okay, that's the basic requirement. Now let's start up Eclipse. Okay, before we do that, let's make sure everything is still working. The conference still recording. It is recording. Camera, everything working, full screen, and the speaker is blinking. That's good. And we will make and then we'll go to camera, and we'll make sure the YouTube recording, it is still live. That's good. Everything seems to be working. So now let's take a look on that. Let's bring let's bring up the Eclipse. Give me a second. Someone's coming in. No problem. Someone just come in the classroom accidentally. So I already have a program preloaded, so it's much quicker. So I don't have to type, since I'm not a fast typer or good typist. So it's easier for me to just preload it. Give me a second. Someone else also. I have a class here. I'm sorry. Okay. So someone just step in, so I make sure they know I'm recording a class here. So basically, let's look at the HTML file first. Okay. So this particular program is quite simple. You don't have a lot in there, as three text fields. I named them FAH, CL, and Celsius, and Kelvin, and Fahrenheit. And they don't have anything in there to start with. Okay, so let's show you what it is first, then we'll talk more about it. So we'll load up into a web browser. So using Firefox. So basically all this is I have a name for this page, and then I have three text fields for Fahrenheit, Celsius, and Kelvin. And I have a button convert, just like was requested. I also set up a reset, which we already have it last time, so I might as well just keep it. So I basically cut paste what I had previously and changing the text field into three text fields separately to start with. So when I type something in, and then I can do convert. Okay, I did not put the actual conversion in there because that's your job. So all I did is I capture the information. Now last time I do on change, when I hit the button, when I type in something, I hit enter, then I trigger the JavaScript function. I do the on change on the text input area. But this time they ask us to do a conversion button. So as you can see from the HTML file, there is no on change event handling. Instead, I have a button to do the conversion on click of the convert. Okay, so I change it a little bit different. But as you can tell, quite simple. We define your HTML file and using your CSS to define the color, and then we use the JavaScript to do the dynamic part of it. So make sure you do that same thing. Separate them into different files for different purpose. So I also have the reset button to do that. Okay, so let's go back a little bit and look at CSS. I'm not going to talk about. I just use the same one, just change the background color. So let's take a look on the JavaScript. To begin with, I do a initialization, window load, on load, and I get the element FAH and do focus. Some of you already know this. So I set focus on the Fahrenheit. The reason is because I want the user to type in something here. So when I start or reset, I always have to focus on that particular text area so they can type. Okay, just a common way people like to do. So I set the focus on that Fahrenheit text field. So the user will be ready to type once they start the program. Okay. So when they enter something, I did not implement the whole program. All I did was capture the value from the text field, put it in string and making sure it's not empty field, or you use the way the program example that was given you in the assignment page, making sure it's not empty, and then convert it. So you want to make use of some if else statements, make sure it's not empty, and then you pass. I use the pass in, but they do pass float. It's up to you. I think pass float is more generic because now I require them to type in an integer value, which they could type. They could type a floating point value. So you probably want to follow the example, do a pass float. Once you get the value, then you can do a calculation based on the value. Of course, I don't do the actual calculation. You have to do it by yourself. Follow the program that was given you within the assignment to do the calculation to convert the Fahrenheit into Celsius. Once you do, you assign that back into the Celsius text field area. Same thing on Kelvin. Once you know the formula, you convert that particular Fahrenheit value, calculate it, and assign it back to the text area. If they enter invalid data, you have to say, please enter a valid number. Okay. And then of course on the reset it's the same, just like last time. You change those text field to be blank, and then you refocus after reset back to Fahrenheit text box or text field, so they can re-enter another value as needed. So as simple as that. As I said, the structure is here, but I didn't complete everything. I didn't do everything. You have to do your check in order to complete this program. Okay, but I'll just give you an example. So once you run, all I did is add 1 to Celsius and add 2 to Kelvin, which is of course incorrect, but it's up to you to make change. So I can then reset, okay, and blank everything. And if I click without enter anything, then we say please enter valid number. Okay, so I type, then we do that again. Okay, that's the requirement. Now the reset button is not required, but since you already have done it last time, you might as well just add it in so you can test. You can test more value. You don't have to blow up the browser again, right? So actually easier for you to do testing anyway. So just implement the reset button also, and you have to correct. I didn't do the correct calculation, so you must do the correct calculation on the conversion to Celsius and Kelvin. So that's what you need to do, minimum, that's what you need to do. However, I'll give you a challenge. That's what they're asking for in this particular assignment. When I first looked at it, I said, well, that's not much. They even give you the program, right? Because we did this text handling, similar thing. Oh, before we go on, yeah. So in case at the beginning I would make a mistake, so that's why I have that statement in there. In case your program is not called. And then Chris asked me today about some issue about his JavaScript, and then we look at it together. So those are the technique we have to use, right? Sometimes you have to create and put in a alert statement, making sure, that's what he did, making sure certain things happen. So here, if I'm not sure why I'm not converting, I want to be sure, so I do an alert of the input string, so I know what I'm getting. So I'm getting the correct value from the Fahrenheit, okay, text field. After that, then I will convert them. So at least I know my function is called, since I do have alert, and I do know I am capturing the correct input string, 1, 2, 3 in this case. Okay, so I am doing it right. You can also say, I say okay. You could also put in alert statement within this if, in case it doesn't fall through and do the right things. Like if you're missing all the braces and things like that, it will mess up. Or sometimes you mistype some of the information, you will not be warned. So only by putting some of the statement like alert and output the value and put in the right place, put in another alert here, then you know whether this particular section of code is being called when you run the program. That's how you debug it. Same thing on the reset. When the button is clicked, okay. So when somehow your button not clicked, the could be two reasons. Sometimes it's because this statement is not correctly formed in HTML, or your JavaScript function was not defined, maybe using a different name, uppercase, lowercase, sensitive, or sometimes they are not formatted properly. Then the function will not be called. It's interesting today, Chris, when we look at his program, everything seems to work, but it doesn't call the function properly. When we cut paste his function into a different file, then it works. It appears that his file, JS file, have some kind of a hidden character or control character in there, possible, that mess up when the browser tries to interpret the JavaScript file. So when he cut paste the function into a different file, then it works. So it happens that way. So it's another thing to watch. So when it doesn't work in a particular JS file, sometimes you could just cut paste the function, put it inline in here, between this, put the function within here, and see whether when you click, does it call. Of course, take out the source inclusion here. Then we determine whether this particular line is correct or not. If it doesn't even call that function, when the function is here inline, there's something wrong with it, right? So you know that. Or sometimes, just like Chris did, is to create another file, cut paste your functions into that file one at a time, and make sure individual function works one at a time. Then you can debug it. There's some of the technique commonly used that you will have to do sometimes in order to debug your program. So it's tedious, but it is a loosely tied language. And a lot of time, you will not know there is a problem until you run the program. And unfortunately, the browser, when it interprets your HTML or JavaScript or CSS, it will not tell you there is a problem. It will just ignore your problem and try to interpret your data as it thinks is correct, which could cause a problem sometimes. So you have to debug it a little bit at a time and develop things in small chunks so you can debug it when it's needed. First, have your HTML, then test individual element one at a time. If it doesn't work, then use some technique that we have just go over, using an alert, moving the functions around, put it inline here within the script tag, and debug it to identify which part. Is it this statement is incorrect, or is it the script has a problem? Okay, that's the technique you could apply. If everything works, it seems to be working, then go back and put an alert statement somewhere in here, like this case, and making sure the function is called, make sure you're passing the information correctly, and put another alert here, and to make sure it comes to that block as you expect. So you know the logic is correct and you're getting the correct information as expected. So you get the alert to know the input value. Then you get the here. That means it does fall through within your program. So the logic is correct and the value is correct. Okay? So that's it. So for you to complete this assignment, you can do of course different structure. I'm just showing you one way, and I always choose the simplest way. Don't want to complicate the issue. The minimum requirement for you is to do this. Enter something in the Fahrenheit field and click a convert button, well, without those alerts. Okay, well, let me change it back. So I don't want it to mess up my, oopsie. So basically, it's easy to comment out those. Okay, now for you, you got to do better job to document your functions. Okay, if you could document your HTML or CSS, it's nice too, but this class is not really for HTML or CSS. We make use of them. So more important, you need to start putting comments into your JavaScript file using the / or /*, and then end with a ** start for multiple lines. So you need to start doing that to make your program more readable, easier to maintain, and for reusability purpose for other people. So you need to start putting in some comments in there using those notations. Okay? So please do say this function is to convert. Of course the name says it, but put a single line here. Convert Fahrenheit to Celsius and Kelvin values, something like that. Okay, just try to do something. So do that, start doing it, because your program getting bigger, particularly when you do the project. And I will review it. I want to make sure I can understand them. So putting in comments like that will help me to understand the purpose of it. So please start doing that. I think Shane already start doing it. That's nice. I like it. So you gotta start doing those comments into your JavaScript program. Okay, make it easier for others to read and maintain. So please do that for all the assignment from now on. I may take out a point or two if you don't do that, because it's just the best practice to put in the comment as needed. Okay, this is all the assignments are all about. So it's pretty straightforward and simple. Okay, so all we're looking for is to enter a value and convert them into Celsius correctly and Kelvin correctly. Please do that correctly, because I will test your program with some input value, making sure you have done the correct conversion, because this is a test to test you how to use those arithmetic expressions and calculation and formulas within JavaScript. So you have to do the calculation properly. Unlike me, I did it very lazy way. Okay, so you have to do it right. Now this is easy, that's all it is, so not complicated. Based on your experience that you do the last 2.2 assignment, you should not have much problem. Cut paste the JavaScript function, the to_c function within the assignment, which is already given to you, right? And convert it and change it to what you need. Cut paste doesn't work, you still have to change some of the setting there. And after you do, you should have no problem making it 3 fields and create a button, which you did last time, and then do the conversion according to what you are going to put in here, and do the if else to check the inputs as needed. So as simple as that, you are done. However, I am giving you a challenge. If you do that, then I'll give you extra credit. That means anything wrong within your assignment, I still will give you full credit. Or if you already have full credit on this assignment, I may give you the extra credit for other assignment that you didn't have full credit. Okay? So the challenge is like that. Instead of always convert Fahrenheit to Celsius or Kelvin, you have the same thing on the screen, but the user can pick to type anything and then hit convert. You will convert from that to the other two. So not just from Fahrenheit. Of course, my program doesn't do it now. If you do, then it will say you have no number enter in that area, because that's what I'm checking, right? So, but for you, the challenge is if they enter something in other field other than the Fahrenheit, you do convert, it will display the converted value in the other two fields. So it's in the Kelvin. When you type in a value, you click convert, then it will provide you the converted value for the other two temperature standard. That's the challenge to you. It's not too difficult if you think about it. All you have to do is change this function. Of course, if not become just convert from Fahrenheit, you make it a generic function called convert. So you have to think which value they enter. If they enter 2, then you have to warn them you can only enter one number. Okay, so you have to check, making sure they have no more than one number enter in those three fields. And then you have to check which field did they enter. Once you know that, then you can just convert from one standard to the other. So it's all about if statement. Since we talk about conditionals, and flow of program, so I'm challenging you to do the extra effort and get extra credit. If you can enter, if the user is allowed to enter any one of the field, and you will convert the value to the other two. So that's the challenge I have to you. And it's not difficult, as I said, but it does give you an extra exercise. So you can make use of the if-else statement a lot more. Okay, you can only learn through exercise, right? So doing that hopefully give you a little bit more into how to manipulate the data and checking the input value. I only do the check once here. Okay, and then the program, do another check. Is it a number? Because they can type in, they could type in a alphabetical alphabetical value. It's not a number, so you do is NaN. If it is it a number? It's not a number. So you can do the check too. Okay, not just making sure it's empty or not. But before we move on, let's make sure everything is still recording. Okay, good. Yeah, I forgot to check it occasionally. Yeah, the camera and speaker is still working. That's good. Okay, we're all good. So you can do more check, making sure even if they enter something is not a number, you capture that and warn them. Okay, those are the things a normal programmer will do. Keep track and validate the input value first before you move on. I'm lazy, so I didn't do too much here. But you could and you should do more than that, is to validate the input data before you process it. Otherwise, your program just failed and the user don't know what happened. Okay, because JavaScript, whatever that is, will bomb and ignore some of the information if you don't check it. So you better check. The purpose of JavaScript is make the front end dynamic. So you can warn the user when something is incorrect. Pop up an alert and ask them to correct the input data so that you can process their request properly. So that's a common practice. So you should, unlike me, you should create more checking whether they're number, whether it's empty field, and making sure, of course, while you check, making sure they are inputting in the correct field, then you can convert it to the other two. And that's an extra challenge I give it to you. So please, don't just do the minimum. Try to experiment more. And I challenge you to do that. That's only through exercise that you can learn. So please also do some research. You can making use of other features. We have shown some of them. Not all. There are many other things you could do with JavaScript. And we could not do all of them in class or showing you examples of all. So it is up to you to experiment some of the features, methods, and access to different attributes of the DOM. Now you know, and you all, I believe all of you have learned DOM before. So you understand all these elements within the document and try to use JavaScript to access to all these DOM documents and try to modify them dynamically and play with them. That's how you learn. Okay, so hopefully you take my advice and do something about it, and then by then you will know more about JavaScript, and there are a lot of things you could do with it. As long as you could identify that particular object, elements, or attributes, then you can dynamically modify them and making your website more fun to use and more and better to view. Okay, that's the way to attract customers. So those are important features. You don't want a boring site and not doing anything dynamically. So not just for data verification purpose on the front end, also to make your site more attractive and more fun to use. That's the purpose of JavaScript. Okay, please do that. That's the demo I have to do today. But let's go back to, let me close it down first. We're still in full screen mode. Let me close that one too. Close all tabs. So that's it for this assignment 3.1. So it's not a complicated one. In fact, I show you the basic structure, the basic one, and they gave you a program for the conversion example. So you could combine all these things together and your knowledge that you have used in the last assignment, and combine all these, you should not have any trouble finishing this assignment. And as I said, I give you the challenge to do any input, not just Fahrenheit, to convert to the other two standards. So you could do that, I'll give you extra credit. Okay, that's the assignment for next Thursday. So you have plenty of time. You have over a week to do that. So please do. Okay, of course you have a couple days left to finish up 2.2 if you have not done it yet. Once you do, you can use the similar structure and create 3.1. And neither one of them are complicated, neither one of them are difficult. So I urge you to do more with them. Okay, pretty soon you are going to do a final report, final project, I believe. So that's why you want to do more and experiment more with JavaScript before you do the final one. So look ahead. Of course, there's another assignment to be done end of next week. So we'll talk a little bit about it next week. But however, please go ahead, since those two come very closely together by end of next week. So you better do ahead and start doing it. If you have any question, send your file to me and let me take a look and I can give you some feedback, and then hopefully you can finish it before the deadline. Okay, let me see what else. I think that's all for this particular module. We have completed this, and then we'll go to forms events. From here on, I don't believe they provide me any presentation slides, but it provides us with multiple links to external websites that we will visit and look at some of the features they have. And I have to take a look on those before next week, so we can look into those and have more discussion. However, this class really is a web-based class. I mean, not web-based class, it's a recorded class most likely, and most of you don't join and during the online session. That means it's hard to do any discussion during the class time. So I will rely you on doing more in the discussion session, or put it inside one of the discussion box, the last one. Okay, and then to ask other folks to chime in, including myself, so we can have better discussion offline. Okay, that's the only way. Since nobody is in class to have a live discussion, so we have to rely on a forum type of session to do discussion as needed. So please do that. But this class is not too complicated. I think most of you already have experience with JavaScript. Of course, you all have experience with HTML and CSS, and some of you are very good, in fact, on JavaScript already. So not much I have to show you, other than saying continue experiment those JavaScript features to polish your skill, to make it better and better. That's it. Okay. Today we don't have much to cover anymore. Let me double check. That's all I plan to cover today. is to get this lecture on objects. We talk about objects DOM and talk about how to access to some of the CSS style, and then we cover everything for this particular module. Okay, and we have talked about our schedule, so you all know. Please review your schedule accordingly. Things will come fast. 3 more weeks. 3 more weeks. Then we are done. Okay, so we have to wrap up. So please don't get behind. Okay, there are a few more assignments you have to do, and make sure you catch up with them and complete it by end of the semester. Other than that, I don't have anything. Today we will finish up quickly. A little bit, I think an hour and 15 minutes, or 20 minutes. So that's it for today. Okay, once it's available, I will send out a link to all of you so you can have access to this presentation, and both the YouTube and also the Canvas link. Okay, so that's it. Thank you for reviewing this, and hope to talk to you again next week. I'm closing this out. Thanks. Bye bye. I am now closing also the YouTube recording.